Okay, welcome to the Helm developer call. This is Monday, Monday. Yeah, I was going to say Thursday, March 5th, 2020. Um, we will start with announcements, go into stand-ups, and then have any discussion items. So this week, there isn't any announcements on the doc. Does anybody have anything? No? All right, let's go into stand-ups. You want to start us, Fisher?
Hi. So this week I have been looking at the version 3.1.2 milestone, the version 3.2.0 milestone, mostly kind of poking and prodding those PRs through, seeing which ones can be reviewed. So the two PRs that I'm going to be taking a look at today and trying to see where we're at with those two is Jacob's PR, which is the one about ownership and adding metadata labels, so then we can figure out if we can upgrade or adopt those resources in there, which would be fantastic, actually, so we could give users that ability to adopt existing resources when they want to. The other one as well was a feature flag that I had requested, actually, which was to do a replace, which basically deletes the resources and re-upgrades over them. So basically people get the same functionality as Helm upgrade dash force from Helm 2, but in a way where they are intentionally doing that destructive action. So basically a kubectl apply dash force is what they're attempting to do. So I'm going to take a look at a PR that does that. It looks quite complex because he's trying to do some backwards compatibility stuff. So I'm going to see if I can go take a look at that and break it down and see if we can do some fixes over there. So that's where my primary focus is right now. Pass off to Josh.
Hello. So this week I attempted to issue Sherpa-ing. So just tried to stay on top of that. There was a Chart Museum release I tried to get to, but just didn't get around to. That's pretty much it. Matt Butcher.
Let's see. The main things I've been working on are Helm graduation, which we've got to give a shout out to Michelle Nerali, who's on the TOC for helping start to get ducks in a row on that. There was a documentation gap and nobody was quite sure how we were supposed to graduate right now. So she's really gotten the ball rolling on that. I'm using a lot of metaphors today. It's because it's fourth Monday. So big thanks to her for that. Matt Farina has also been working really hard on that. The other thing I've been working on has been the Helm security assurance case. This is to get our CII silver badge, and it was the last requirement. It's basically like a 20-page document that explains, it's kind of, as a philosopher, I find it fascinating because it's basically like almost a legal style argument where you're saying, assertion, we are secure in our development practices. Here's how I justify it with evidence. And then you list all the evidence one item at a time. We do X, we do Y, we do Z. So that at a glance, somebody can look at it and say, oh, okay, so they're following these practices and they're following them because they do this, or they believe they've accomplished this and they point to these. And actually, so the PR is out there and Matt Farina looked at it and said, oh, here are a couple things you didn't talk about. And I realized that was a good example of why these things are good, because he could read through it and say, oh, well, here's an area of security that you forgot to address. And that's exactly what you want in this kind of document. So, wow, that was weird. I said Matt Farina's name and he just appeared.
Magic like that.
So I'm going to go back, hopefully today, maybe tomorrow morning if I have too many meetings, and finish up the security assurance case. And then we should be all done with the CII silver status on that as soon as that gets merged. Mats can summon Mats as part of our secret superpowers. I am supposed to be traveling next week. However, as with probably everybody here, I'm waiting for my employer to weigh in on whether or not I'm actually traveling next week. So that's kind of fun. But if I'm not here next week, it's because I'm traveling. Okay, well, on that note, then I suppose I should pass it on to third Matt, since I did summon him after all. It's only polite. I'm going to stop there.
All right. Oh, there was a question. Is there a Kubernetes?
It's not a real question. Go ahead.
Oh, why is it even called KubeCon? Why isn't it just called Cloud Native Con? Kubernetes isn't the center of the universe, is it? Okay, so I've been working on trying to take Helm for graduation. The original goal was to have it for the conference that was supposed to be at the start of next month, but that's been pushed off, so there's not as much pressure. But on the 17th of March, Tuesday, St. Patrick's Day, there's a plan to evaluate, wow, up to 3 projects for graduation, and Helm is on that list right now. I took Helm through CNCF, SIG app delivery, and they had no questions or qualms with it on yesterday. And I'm almost done writing up the due diligence and all of those details in order to just go through and prep the pull request. Really, the thing that will end up probably be blocking me on the pull request at the end of the day is the security assurance case. I want that in because they do call out about the best practices, and I'd like to say we have the silver and it's done in order to do that. So my plan is to have a pitch deck for the 17th and to pitch it with Dr. Butcher's help, hopefully, and go for that. And so I've been spending a lot of time on that, a few reviews here and there, and I helped Josh with issue triage this week. And who hasn't gone?
Let's see. Go, Martin.
Oh, thanks for doing that, Adam. I didn't even have to look.
I'm here to help.
Okay. So this week I was going around with some docs. So I just had to put a note in around the what we had mentioned earlier about when we were doing builds of different releases for different platforms and the ones that we support in relation from a build or from a test perspective, and that otherwise any of the other builds we're doing belong to the community that requested it. So that went in, so thanks for reviews on that. And I've also pushed in about library charts because that was on my backlog for a while and literally I forgot about it. So so I pushed in some docs on that, so that might be of interest to Farina and Butcher. So if anyone wants to jump on that, have a look. The doc kind of got a bit longer than I expected to, but yeah, there we go. And just doing some reviews then as well. So yeah, that's all from me. So I will hand off to Scott.
Hello. For me, I have been primarily 2 things. When I thought we were going to Amsterdam soon, we had set some goals. Reinhard and I set some goals for the chart testing and releaser stuff and the Helm actions for people who are, to help them move their, to help orgs and individuals move their charts from the stable and incubator, hopefully just mainly stable, into their own Helm repos. So our goal is to have stable releases for stable version 3 Helm 3 compatible releases for chart testing, chart releaser, and then the actions. So that's one thing that some headway's been made and we're working on. The second thing is I've been working with a couple of people to help move some of those charts. Specifically, I mean, a lot is done, so I won't list them all, but specifically we did that. I think I may have mentioned in a previous week that we worked with the Jaeger team to do that set up a Jaeger tracing Helm repo. Kong, basically they did it themselves, but just, relied on a few of us to help them with a few things. Of note, because it's so highly used, is the Nginx ingress chart. That one, working with the Ingress Nginx project maintainers to host that. That was the one I had a weird question about before, because it was hosted under the Kubernetes GitHub project. It would be kind of weird to have a Kubernetes charts repo. They just decided to, at least for now, have potentially for now, we would keep that within the repo itself, the Ingress Nginx repo itself. And that was just a small update there. And then we're also proposing with the Prometheus team for them to maintain charts as long as they don't take full responsibility for it. They just host it for as a canonical location for the community. And then the other major one is Bitnami, but they're doing that all on their own. Carlos is pretty much taking the reins and just running with it. I just helped with the issue and making it visible to people so no one freaks out. The users don't freak out. That's pretty much it for me. Who has not gone? Paul? Yeah. Oh, Jacob?
Yep. So I've got that PR open that Matt mentioned earlier around resource ownership and allowing Helm to be a little bit more intelligent about adopting existing resources. And it's got a little bit more work to do for sure. I just wanted to get feedback on the initial design, make sure we were okay with the model of adding annotations to all resources created by Helm, and potentially adopting, obviously pulling them in automatically if they have the right annotations, but also potentially to require exclusivity of ownership by erroring out if Helm has released metadata that says that it owns a resource in the storage for the release, but the annotations don't match up after these are applied. So that would guarantee that if you have like modified the release metadata out of band somehow, that you can still only have one correct release that's mutating resources. So that's the next step for that PR, is to add that implementation. But thanks for looking at it, Matt. Is that everyone?
Adam and Bridget haven't gone?
And we added Paul to the list. I'm not sure if we're putting Paul on the spot and making him say things or not. Really, the only update I have is, hey, Reinhardt and I were going to give an intro to Helm session at KubeCon EU. We had a call scheduled this week to work on it, and now we are not, which is, just one of the zillion things that has been hilariously disrupted this week. That, and I added a couple of things to the discussion if we get to it. So let's see, where are we going to hear from Jacob? Oh, sorry, Paul?
Yeah, sure. You can hear from me. Very similar to you, KubeCon plans cancelled. So the deep dive into Helm I was going to be working on is no longer being worked on. Well, for now at least. So we get a reprieve on that. I have been doing some stuff that I thought was worth mentioning. I've discovered that both in the last couple of weeks, both Helm file and the Bitnami Kube apps now fully support Helm 3. So that was very exciting to find. Needing to run Tiller just for those, it was painful. So that was definitely worth mention. And there was one other thing I was going to mention. Oh, I've got a pull request in the Helm repo itself to script crafting the release notes when doing a release. So it'd be good to get some eyes on that and either push that through or get some comments. And that's it for me.
I think we're back to
That
Adam.
just leaves me. So this week, all I worked on was the, after upgrading Kubernetes, having depreciated API versions for resources, and how do we handle that? So I had that as a discussion item on there, and since I'm in charge today, we're just going to jump right into my discussion item and go out of order. So I linked to an issue there. Unfortunately, Kubernetes removed API versions. So when you try to upgrade it or apply, when you parse the old version, those are no longer valid API versions. And Kubernetes itself cannot parse those. They completely remove support for them. The way they got around it when doing an upgrade is they just bumped your versions for you. So any deployments you had in there, they modified it and gave it new versions, which I don't understand why they did that. So there isn't a way using Kubernetes libraries to parse old API versions. So I'm not sure how to move forward on it. The only options I came up with are writing our own parser and hot swapping all API versions. So we're essentially going to bump versions on the user's behalf, just like Kubernetes did. Or we have to stream edit just the raw data, which is not a good idea because we could be affecting even comments in there or notes in there. So I was not able to come up with a clean way to fix this. There was a lot of debate on if it was a Helm bug. It is not. There's upstream issues. And if anybody has a better workaround, I am all ears.
So if I look at just real quick, do you know which repository is the problem? Because the API repository still has the old versions in it. The Kubernetes API repository, that's the root source for the objects, still has things like v1 beta 1 of the apps group in it.
Yeah, we rely on the libraries that kubectl consumes and parses. So we would completely have to change all our internals from depending on that library, because that library only supports current API versions.
So it's because kubectl no longer supports it. Kubernetes internally, the client Go and the API project support it, and they still can handle those old things, but the latest versions of kubectl can't.
Correct, and those are the libraries we depend on for parsing.
Okay.
And that one API was not the only API that was removed. Quite a few were. So,
and more are coming. So we use the Ingress API. It's like extensions Ingress. That's going to be coming out soon, and it'll be networking Ingress. So that's also going to be an upcoming problem. All the extensions APIs are going to be gone, and several things that have releases but had betas, those are all going to be gone. They already are or soon. And it's the API server doesn't accept them anymore, even if it has something that's already stored there. And I guess kubectl doesn't work with them. But the underlying code in Client Go and API is still accessible even in the latest versions. It's just our access to that code is the problem.
I have a thought on this.
Yeah.
I think so. This only occurs when you have upgraded the Kubernetes control plane itself, right? And you had an existing installation. So in this case, the Kubernetes is already serving that resource at the newer API version, right? So if Helm could simply ignore that resource that it doesn't have the ability to parse with the new Kubernetes client code, we could just remove it from the old previous revision resources list. And then once my PR is merged that allows Helm to take ownership of existing resources that have the correct annotation, then just by removing it from the previous revision, we would, instead of doing a two-way diff, we would miss any changes between the two, but we would be able to just adopt that new version of the resource that the Kubernetes API is already serving.
Right. The issue is the error happens before that step. So just parsing the raw data. So you have a byte stream. We can't even parse that into Kubernetes API objects. That's where the bug happens, is actually at parsing. So we don't even have the objects to look at to modify.
So it's not possible to break it down into the bytes into sub documents first?
We would have to parse it ourselves outside of Kubernetes libraries.
I see.
The Kubernetes primitives are there, but if we go to actually parse it in order to understand the document, we're having kubectl do the parsing for us in its libraries, and its libraries doesn't know how to parse that anymore because it's ignoring the deprecated things.
Mhm.
So we can't look at and inspect to even, unmark. Yeah, we've got issues there.
Yeah, so it would actually have to be like stream edited before we parse it, or we have to parse it ourselves, make any sort of modifications, and then re-encode it, and then pass it through and parse it again. Which, I mean, we're just going to end up introducing a lot of issues, I think, if we do that.
Yeah, assuming we can solve the parsing problem somehow and correctly ignore an error when it's just a API version that doesn't exist on the remote cluster, then the resource
Yeah. The issue is the libraries won't let you do that. And if we just ignore an error that comes in, I don't think that's really an option, because then we have the same issue where we can't parse that one object.
Yeah, we might need an opt-in flag or something, or perhaps we could even have a flag that lets you pass in additional API versions to tell the tooling about, because
right, but that still doesn't solve the issue of being able to parse it with the Kubernetes libraries, because it won't let you pass that in. So we would have to write our own parser for it. Trust me, I spent a week on it. I couldn't find a way to do it. So if anybody knows a way to parse it into API objects, not using Kubernetes libraries, I would love
Is it
to know
CLI
about it.
runtime right now that we use, or is it actually kubectl?
I'm
It's
just
CLI
wondering
runtime.
if we do
CLI
something
runtime.
similar for custom resources too, because how do we handle custom resource instances that are deployed within a chart if there's
Yeah, we handle all those as unstructured. So we could do that, which I tried, but then we lose validation.
right?
And
Maybe
in order to pass it to dynamic client, you actually have to parse out and convert to a not group version kind, but resource version kind, which is different. And that is not easy to get from an unstructured object.
fun stuff.
Yeah, so the only way I've found to do it is just write our own Kubernetes parser and then build in all the logic, because it's not built into Kubernetes. We're going to have to write it all because they just edit stuff under the hood on upgrade. So there's no existing code to be able to do that in Kubernetes.
Are we the only project that has this problem?
No, it's across the board. I've found numerous issues upstream. It's breaking everywhere. Because even if you just have a raw YAML with a deployment with an old API, and you run an apply on it on an old cluster, and that cluster gets upgraded, if you run an apply on it, it will not parse. It'll error out. It'll say, hey, I don't know what to do with this YAML.
So it sounds like we want to try to fix this even higher than Helm, if possible.
So my guess is that Kubernetes stance is these are all deprecated APIs. You shouldn't have been using them anymore anyway. So we gave you a very long window of warning. Like the window of warning for betas is 6 months or 3 versions, 9 months or 3 versions. And many of these APIs were like 7 versions or 6 versions and like a year and a half. So they're basically saying you shouldn't have been doing it anyway. This is on you, not on us.
And we've known it for a long time too and discussed it a number of times, but since those versions just lingered, we were like, eh.
Yeah, so what Kubernetes kind of expects is that those API versions you would have upgraded before upgrading your cluster. And I really think that's going to be the only clean way to do it, is that you have to do a release with the new API versions before you upgrade. That way your resources actually match what you put into Kubernetes, and they're not modified under the hood.
Should we add Helm lint rules around this?
Yeah, that might actually be a fantastic mitigation strategy to figure out if you're on an older version of a workload or Ingress or something, and there's a newer version of the API out. We should probably give an informative warning or message.
Yeah, and it's not that the API versions have been upgraded. Like they completely got rid of V1 Beta 1, and it's like a brand new API. And Kubernetes just moves you to a brand new API. So unless those charts are in the new API, essentially deployments just went away for V1 Beta 1.
Yeah, the API will reject them as resources it doesn't know. They left you the primitives if you wanted to build tools, but Kubernetes itself just says we're done with them. Although they did leave the primitives for people who want to build tools and still deal with those, which is why the API repository still has them listed and has all the code around them. They're just like, peace out. We gave you long enough.
We could also write a Helm plugin or subcommand that would modify or create a new release that just imports whatever the state is of the newer API version that you might just have to like pass in the
Yeah, that's
that you want to upgrade to.
I talked to Butcher yesterday, and that's one option we came up with is to build a plugin, but we could even use a Go plugin, but it uses the old Kubernetes libraries. So it'd have to be outside of Helm, but we could have another binary that still supports it that you can then parse the objects and then parse them into, and then you can convert them into the new objects using the old libraries, and then you would have to go back to Helm and you could do upgrades then.
It could use unstructured objects too, because it would just like get whatever the current resource is and like patch that YAML into the resources rendered.
Yeah. There are actually, if you look at the comments in that issue up there of like probably halfway up the thread, there are some people who have mentioned like shell scripts or things that they have started jankily working with to try and work around this whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about with stream editing, where like just pull the raw release and then modify what needs to be modified outside of any Helm process or parsing process. And then that would be the same behavior as what Kubernetes did. So we would match Kubernetes then, because that's what they did with the objects. So if we just did the same thing, then we would end up in the same state, which would allow Helm to work as it did.
Yeah, Kubernetes is already serving the resource with whatever changes it made. So we can grab that and pop it into the release metadata.
Yeah, and I came up with a way to actually test this, to reproduce it, which is pull up a cluster using the old, that supports old API versions, do a release with the old API versions. And then if you just suck out the secret, if you pull up a new cluster that doesn't support them, and then just inject the secret, don't even worry about the resources. Just if the secret's there of the release, then when you try to upgrade on it, even with the new API versions, it won't work. So that's how I set up my test environment. So if anybody wants to do that and bang on it, feel free, but I could not come up with a solution other than editing stuff outside of Helm.
Yeah, and the other two things as well to point out here, I'm not sure if a post render could necessarily work, Paul, because this is before we've even parsed the manifests from the previous release. It's not even getting there. And then the other part, Jacob, I know you mentioned in the comments before, is if a recreate, that feature could potentially do this. And recreate is addressing live objects, but it's not dealing with the metadata or the release manifest stream. So that won't address that either. So yeah, it's quite a pickle.
Yeah, and I wish I had a solution to offer people, but that's the only workaround I have found.
So can I suggest we time check and move this to an outside meeting, and if people want to continue this sort of the issue, because we're already 3 minutes over.
Yep. Sorry, wasn't paying attention. Let's go
I
ahead
know,
and do
you're
this.
just the moderator.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my one job. So as far as we're losing people fast because
We're out of time for everything else. We'll have to shift it.
We can bump up. I mean,
Bring up
at least my
assignments.
stuff, I put assignments are in already except for issue triage. People can figure that out, I guess.
Okay.
But we've got assignments, so.
Well, great. Well, thanks everybody.
Somebody want to take issue triage?
I can take that.
Okay.
I can shadow him on it.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Then you could see all the things we don't have documented.
Thanks everybody.